Hello everyone, this is Catherine and welcome to Tech Talk with Perfomatix. Perfomatix is a full stack engineering company specialized in agile product development. Our Tech Talks aim to bring the insights from the world of product engineering, digital transformation, and legacy modernization. Our guest speaker for today is Mr. Liju Pillai, CEO and co-founder of Perfomatix. Liju is a tech visionary with 17 years of experience in the space, and he has been crafting solutions for businesses all over the world. Today, Liju will be speaking about the rise of web apps in enterprises. Welcome, Liju.
Hey, Catherine, thanks for having me. It's great to be on this talk and to share my experience in this space and to share the changes that I've seen as being working with global customers over this period, and also starting at Perfomatix with this with a specialization on building products and web applications to solve customer problems. So it's great to have been part of this talk.
Yes, thank you, Liju. So, even with the new devices and platforms that are emerging every day, the web browsers remain a top touch point between the customer and the business, right? So there is a high demand from the market and consumers to meet these unique user requirements where the web apps have to satisfy different criteria from security, the ease of use to stability and offline functionality. So Liju, let me start by asking you, in your 17 years of experience, how has the web app development landscape evolved, especially for businesses?
It's a great question, Catherine. Um, I would say there's a paradigm shift in how web application development has evolved from mid 2000s to where we are now today. Uh, this was enabled by a lot of events that has happened and a lot of innovations that has happened during this time. So if I had to summarize what the significant change is, basically the end result is that user experience it has significantly improved over this time. So the end users are now able to use applications, web applications in a much more, web applications which are very similar to the native experience they get in mobile, right? But at the same time, this has happened at the cost of the user. The development experience, the development process has become extremely complicated with a significant number of tools and frameworks to worry about. The overall project, there's a lot of friction to getting started. The learning curve is also pretty steep right now. If someone is planning to get into web development, the learning curve is quite steep at this point. But one other interesting thing to note is that developer experience overall has improved, because now someone who is in the space, it feels more empowered because they have really powerful tools which enable them to do new features and capabilities which they couldn't do maybe 5 to 7 years back. So it's a very exciting space. One major thing that I've seen that has shifted is which is the movement from server-side application development to server-rendered web applications to single-page applications in this time. So that has been because of the mobile-first development approach. And I think this trend is going to continue in the coming years. And all the frameworks and tools that you see are more or less around this specific thing. And then some notable events that has happened which has actually accelerated this change, or rather enable these changes, are advent of technologies like Ajax, which made web applications more dynamic, mobile and iPhone coming into the picture, and the explosion of mobile first development approach, REST APIs, and the entire applications were built around the REST APIs, and the client side consumption started happening. Obviously, the browser technologies have improved significantly over this time, right? Not to mention the internet speed. So with more powerful internet, people want to consume more data. Then the browsers also started catching up to that. All the big players are right now behind the browsers with Chrome, Edge, Safari. So it's a very, very interesting and exciting space. There's a lot of fragmentation right now in this ecosystem. Hopefully things will get consolidated down the line, but the adoption of this in B2B and B2C space is significantly bigger. And I think I'm really excited where this is, and it's a great time to be in web application development.
That's interesting, Liju. So why do you think the single-page web applications are gaining, a lot more popularity over traditional server-side web apps?
It's good because single page application, like I mentioned, adds a lot of complexities in terms of learning new frameworks, new technologies to worry about. But even then, companies are starting to adopt it because the web is trying to mimic mobile right now, as you see, because web is trying to borrow features from mobile, which you can think of push notification. Now you have web push notifications, or you have offline capabilities now available on web. So these are features which was brought in by mobile, and now the web is trying to catch up, and to also get the users now want to have that slick, fast user experience they used to get in the mobile, with the fast transition between pages, fast load speed. So all these means that there is, I don't think there is a going back into server page applications where people had to wait for that white page in between you load different screens, right? So that day is gone. But to enable this, now you have to bring in a lot more tooling, a lot more frameworks to manage the complexity on the front end. So that I think single page application development is here to stay, and this is going to be the trend going forward. Obviously, there are a lot of innovation happening here, a lot of tools that is coming out, every few months. So it is, this trend is here to stay, and there is huge adoption of this by both B2B and B2C customers. Especially, there were some challenges in early days of single page applications with SEO and rankings, but I think those are overcome now with the significant now adoption we can see in B2B and B2C space for web application development.
That's really interesting, Liju. So why do you think there's a different approach in B2B and B2C web app development?
So B2B and B2C, that the end of the day, the toolings or frameworks you use more or less remain the same. You still use Angular, React, Vue, or other frameworks, but there is a major difference in the approach you take. The priorities are kind of different between these two web application development. So that when you take B2C, it is, the priorities are more on load time, performance, the user experience. They want the user to stay there, and end of the day, focus on that click to action, even that generate revenue or for the customer. So I mean, there are some interesting study that says Amazon gains 1% revenue for every 100 millisecond improvement in page speed. So their entire focus of companies are right now on page speed and performance, but that is not the case when you take a B2B product, which is an internal system or a SaaS application, where the priority is mostly on security, or fine-grained control on who can access what. So these kind of things are much different. Again, scale is not a huge problem in B2B internal applications, unlike B2C, or form factor is also not a problem, because B2C, if you have an e-commerce site, you need it to work on any form factor, but you don't have that kind of an issue when it comes to a B2B system. So the difference, like I said, is the priorities, and based on this, your development approach, methodologies changes, even while using very similar. So it used to be, not everyone used to be single page application across, but right now there's adoption of single page application is now there across all B2B and B2C, but the approach you take is different. You need different set of mindset and expertise to execute one versus the other. So some focus on maintainability over a longer term period, but you don't need to worry about that on another side. So that's where I see that B2B versus B2C approach.
Yeah, that's great. Can you talk more about the different categories in B2B web apps?
So B2B broadly you can divide into let's say the consumer facing app side of it. So you can have Slack. Slack is a B2B application where it's a SaaS product that is their revenue generating system platform. But obviously you will have n number of systems behind the scene which is going to support execution of that. It could be an order management, a billing, or it could be returns, it could be a sales, field force management. So there are n number of systems that are essential which is running behind the scenes. So broadly these two gets classified, and these two gets different priorities and different development approaches. The toolings are also different. So for example, you take one of the customers we developed, they had, so most of these dashboards or MIS report applications still remain in spreadsheet. So eventually what happens is when we speak to a lot of our customers, their requirements outgrow spreadsheet. So spreadsheet has this problem of that is a single source of truth, but there is no way to version it or control it. Who can edit it, or which tab, or I can't say that finance guy can only see this tab versus other. It's very difficult to manage a spreadsheet, and eventually what we are seeing is a lot of managers are seeing this is outgrowing their requirement. So there are examples where we took an application for a large logistic customer where they had their rate calculator, which their sales team was using, which is still in a spreadsheet they go around in their mobile app. We took that data and converted that into a line of business. We call it line of business application, for which is enabling managers to roll out solutions. So that something like that could be done in 2 to 3 weeks with a very specialized set of tools and approaches you take in developing it. Yes.
Yeah. So can you go deep into the different development approaches and tools that takes into building a line of business web app? Can you dive into it?
Okay, so when it comes to line of business web application, or I'm talking about all this back-end support applications, right? The challenge I see is it's always second priority because always your revenue and also always your resources and priorities on your revenue generating application. All your developer talent, everything goes towards this. So for everything else, this is where the build versus buy decision comes into play. Some of the critical operational systems like HRMS, ERPs, or CRMs are all go through this build versus buy decision. And with the subscription and cloud-based solutions available, a lot of build decisions are now shelved, and people are moving towards buy because you don't have an initial long-term commit there. But however, when you see, there are broadly 3 approaches. One is you buy out of the shelf solution. The second is you go with bespoke custom development, right? But probably see with a lot of managers or the departments, they don't have access to IT, and this gets always deprioritized. And also when you reach out to certain companies who are doing this, that, like I said, the mindset and expertise is slightly different. If you take this as priority and work on this with the right set of tools, we can develop this in very fast. The third set is this thing called low code, no code platform. So you have solutions like Power Apps from Microsoft, or out systems which allow you to drag and drop. But these are all targeted towards business, non-developer business users. But again, what we see in our experience is there is quite a bit of friction for adoption of these, even for non-business, non-developers. And now I think that the right mix, what we see is that low code platform, which is accelerate this, which is enable the developers to speed it up, but take out a lot of the rudimentary repeated task out of their bucket. So that's how I see the different toolings and approaches where we get.
So let me ask the next question, as in, based on the current trends that you see, there's a lot of focus in developer experience, like you mentioned earlier. So what are the major technologies for development of enterprise web apps?
So it's very interesting and dear question to me, because it is an area that keeps expanding every day, and you have to be on top of all these things. So there are some clear winners in different areas. So if the word that gets thrown around quite a bit is the full stack development. So there are full stack developers, there are full stack development, and what stands out, as I mentioned in my one of the previous questions, is JavaScript has become a first class citizen in this space. So most of the toolings are around JavaScript. The clear winners I could see on the front end are Angular, React, and Vue.js. For one is a framework, one is a library, one is kind of in between both. And each of these have their own fan following, and they're supported by one by Google, one by Facebook. So there is significant backing and significant fan following for different approaches. There is frequent releases, new features coming out in all these frameworks. It's the choice between one versus the other mostly depends upon what specific requirement you have and what kind of skill sets you have within your team. So I think from a framework and library point of view, for the Vue, the front end side, I would say these 3 are the top. One of the clear trends that I can see and technology that is really catching up is TypeScript. which is applicable across, which is allowing you to have more type safe JavaScript. There were a couple of other solutions like CoffeeScript, but I think the TypeScript is for Microsoft and it has just taken off this huge developer adoption for that. And then you have a lot of toolings around testing like Jest and Protractor. So there is a bunch of toolings that you see around the testing framework. Then you have the CI/CD problem where you deploy it, then you're versioning. This is all in the front end space. Then when you come to back end, you have a different the top programming language still have Node. Node is preferred in many cases because it is still JavaScript and kind of enables full stack development, because as a JavaScript developer, I can still, so you can do TypeScript in Node.js, so it kind of stretches from the front end to back end in TypeScript. There is also significant adoption for Spring and Java Spring in enterprise sectors. It's still a preferred framework in enterprise companies. Then you have your usual suspects like PHP, Ruby on Rails, Ruby. So this is, so it's what I'm talking about this, and even in the backend you have its own testing frameworks for each of these, that other toolings, monitoring, deployments. So this has become quite a bit of fragmented, and people are now spoiled by choices, which is also adding a lot of complexity. So as a new person trying to enter into this space, trying to figure out what are the minimum set of tools I need to deploy, it's a daunting task now to say, right? So it's this is where it is currently.
Yeah, it sounds like a really complex task, So what about the challenges these enterprises would be facing, and the time frame or the kind of typical team structure that you'd recommend for line of business web apps?
Right. So to touch upon your point on it's challenging, I think someone new who is trying to get into web development now will be overwhelmed by the choices. Like, how should I start this? What are the technologies you need to learn? A bunch of things you need to learn and get used to. So yes, it is definitely challenging. So the challenges that we see in enterprises are, one is this itself, like how do you take your existing team and make them learn all this? That learning curve is quite steep, and finding talent is definitely a challenge that we see. Second, what you see is obviously line of business applications or support systems are having priority issues, because you don't have the IT team to back it up, or things like that. So it's always a challenge to do it. And when you're reaching out to development agencies or companies, the development approach is also different. And when your manager doesn't have that kind of timeline or budget to execute it, so it's a different mindset that you need to see. So we see a lot of challenges, and also integration into existing system, the friction with the IT team to deploy something that you built into their servers. So there is quite a bit of friction, and because of this, there's a lot of opportunity in this space which is not underutilized. And when we speak to a lot of managers, they have a lot of need for building such solutions, but it is very difficult for them to make it to production. So next point, next question you asked was about the timelines. So it's a very difficult question to answer, but I can tell you from some of the experiences we had. So, a simple example I mentioned before about converting a spreadsheet into a rate calculator web application and wrapped mobile application web view. Something like that, using our own proprietary low code platform, took us 3 weeks. Now that is on one end of it, but on the other side of it, you can take a solution that we developed for optical, OCR, to read different formats of invoices, do image recognitions and training to ensure that. So this was run for a huge logistic customer who have all these bill of sale way bills coming in, and this has to be scanned, and then the data has to be moved into different systems, and also need to be integrated into different databases and things like that. So a complex thing like this, we could execute this in 8 to 10 weeks timeline. So it's about understanding. It's not about reinventing the wheel. It is about understanding what are the right tools available for each of these. You have n number of tools. What is the right one to pick for the specific need? Some OCR itself, you have tools which is worth huge licensing fee to a pay-per-use model. So it's about understanding the roadmap, understanding the requirement, picking the right tools, and walking along with the customer in building this. Yes.
That's great. Let me conclude by asking you, so what are some of the upcoming trends that you predict, and what are some of the technologies to watch out for, in future in the web app landscape?
So web application, I would say, is good. It's a really hot space. It is, it's a very interesting space to be in. It's a great time to be in part of this. So there are a few key things that I'm really keenly watching and following. One of the thing is the emergence of WebAssembly. It's a new tool which allows for different programming languages to be executed on the servers, on the browser. So it's still in its nascent days. We need to see how that adoption is going to happen. So this is a very interesting area that we are keenly watching, which has the potential to change how web applications are developed now. So that is a very, very, very interesting space. And also another thing that I'm keenly watching is the development of the progressive web application approach, which is still gaining steam, and a lot of companies are still following that. So that is another trend I'm closely watching. Another interesting thing is, like I mentioned, the toolings are quite a bit of fragmented right now. The reason being, I think it is part of that development, the cycle of new tools coming out, and each individual developers taking it and making it, adding enhancements and making changes to each of this. Now then you have the right now where you stand is for each of these requirement you have multiple mature tools. So there I feel there is going to be some sort of a consolidation of some of this, and there will be some clear winners. So for example, TypeScript is kind of a clear winner right now, and it's going to stay there for maybe at least next 2 to 3 years. But in the testing frameworks, or let's say there are new things like Next.js coming up for frameworks. There's a Jamstack approach coming. So there's a lot of things that is coming up, but some consolidation of these fragmented tools is what I'm keenly watching for. Another one is not a trend, but a hope, is where this browser standards and APIs become more standardized so that the developer experience gets even better. Now, I think there's a right movement in that direction now, because it's more or less standardized right now. But I think that will be a huge boon to this space, where all developers have a much better developer experience through having a standardized browser experience. I think the fourth and quite interesting one is full stack edge computing, right? So right now what we are seeing is the browse, you can serve all your static content, your HTMLs or images from CDN. So it is available to you at the edge. That was where it started. Right now, what the trend is serverless computing. So serverless computing is also now distributed. So through Lambda, you can take your computing also closer to you. So previously it would be sitting somewhere in data center, some US or some part of Europe. But right now that is also coming closer to the edge. That adoption is there. So serverless trend for this full stack development is a very interesting space. But one more key thing that could totally change this, I feel, is adding of distributed databases also into this stack. So once that happens, that is a upcoming space. There are a few players in there, solutions like CockroachDB, and there is a couple of other solutions which I can't think of right now. But once this space matures, so your entire full stack applications can be distributed and available to your end users on the edge, and that has a huge impact downstream. So these are few trends I'm really watching for, which has a potential to not only incrementally make this better, but also dramatically have a major change in how web applications are developed and deployed.
That's really exciting. This was a really great conversation with you, Liju, today. So we got to understand the complex and huge landscape that is web apps, and the possibilities it offers for enterprises in terms of line of business and customer facing sites as well. So thank you so much for joining Tech Talk with Perfomatix today. I'm looking forward to creating more and more Tech Talks with you.
Thanks, Catherine, for having me. It was wonderful having this chat with you. Looking forward to more such conversations. Stay home, stay safe. Thanks.
Thank you.